Welcome back to Grand Theft World Podcast. We have a special guest tonight. This is Samuel Rivera. You might have seen some of his videos on the YouTube. He has a wide array of whether it's poignant compositions about a certain topic or just him helping clients. He's a full-time cinematographer, videographer. He helps people bring their ideas into visual life on the internet. It's a main piece of a lot of companies' marketing, but he also has a strong philosophical underpinning, a passion that he likes to exercise on a regular basis. We featured some of his videos before here on the podcast. Samuel, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, Richard. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm excited. We don't do many pre-taped interviews and such, but you got tight windows of time within you working, and you're getting a lot out of your 168 hours every week. So let's go back to the beginning. What was like Samuel before he broke out of his shell? What was he like? And what was the transformation or metamorphosis like? And first off, did you go to public schooling, and like where did that origin start? Like where did you get started?
Yeah, so I got started. Yes, I did go to public school. I just went to and that's really where my education sort of stopped. I only really went up to high school. I did take one semester in college, and I quickly found out that this was not for me. So I dropped out from that, and I continued pursuing a career in the corporate world. So I did that for about 20 years before it transformed into doing what I do now, which is full-time filmmaking.
20 years in corporate world. I did 6 years in corporate world. It was awful. Like I was totally involved in my work. I was giving all my passion, all my heart to my employer to get their dreams and wishes into reality. And when I stepped back later to look at like, who's I working for and who am I donating? If they're paying me a lot of money, I must be able to bring something special to the table. So who am I donating that talent and that energy transfer that they can't do for themselves, right? And I didn't like it. So that I've been independent now for almost 20 years. Tell us about your first 20 years in the corporate world. And like, what was your life like? How did you feel? What was your outlook? These sort of things. What goes on with those golden handcuffs of the paycheck?
Yeah, I'll definitely answer that question. But just to sort of riff off of what you said before, like, working for the man, I felt like that as well. Like working in the corporate world, I'm like, man, I'm giving so much of my time, right? If you think about it, you're there for 8 hours, really 9 hours, because they give you a lunch break. But you're there dedicated for 9 hours, and then it's your commute there and commute back, and it's all the prep time that goes, before and after work in order to work this full-time job. But looking back at it now, I would say that though working at that corporate or doing that corporate career, it gave me a lot of skills that I was able to apply to my business now. So yeah, it did suck at the time, but I learned a lot from doing that. If there's a way to look at that in an optimistic way.
Do you remain friends with people that you worked with back in corporate world?
Yeah, well, I throughout the 20 years, I wasn't at the same company or the same position throughout those 20 years. I first started off in as a customer service rep. So I'll answer your question. So I backed up after high school. Like I said, I had to find a job. At that time in my life, I had got married really young, and I started a family, so I needed to work. I thought that trying the college thing for one semester would help me, in my career within the corporate world. Because at the time, that's really what I wanted to do. I thought this was the best avenue for me. I'll climb the corporate ladder.
Well, and that's what everyone tells you to do. Go to university to get a corporate job.
Yeah. And that's what I did. And I thought that's what I wanted. And at the time it fulfilled my, my needs in terms of putting food at the, on the table and supporting my family. But over time, I became very unhappy with, that career, especially as I found out what my true passion was, which was filmmaking. But after high school, going back to that, like I said, I started a family young, but I was in a marriage where I was completely unhappy. To fast forward within that marriage, she ended up, cheating. We ended up, getting divorced. And at that time in my life, I was probably about, I want to say about 26 or so. I was 100 pounds overweight. I had to move back in with my parents, and I was probably at the lowest point in my life. I just had no financial income whatsoever after paying child support and so forth, and taking on all the debt. I was at my lowest in life.
Good. That's a good part of the story. There's a lot of people there right now that are fearing being there right now. You've been there and done that. So people say like the easiest place to start building up is when you hit rock bottom, because it's a solid foundation. Did you reach a rock bottom situation? Was it like, because I've been overweight in the past, I might be a little overweight right now, by some people's measures. I remember like, one day you go to put on a pair of pants or you put on a suit and it just doesn't fit. And it's like, I'm going to be late because this, it's like, did you get to, what was yours? Like, what was yours?
Well, it was really ultimately going through that divorce and having somebody disrespect you, in probably the worst way possible in a marriage. And so it was really that, having to move back in with my parents, having literally, no money, no savings, nothing to fall back on, and just having dealing with a mountain of debt. So that was my rock bottom. I was just completely unhappy with who I had turned into as a person. You look back, you think back of when you were a kid and you're like, I have these dreams and these goals and I want to be this person. And here I am, at 25, 26, I'm like, what the fuck did I do with my life? How do I rebuild myself from here? And, you know, you can. I mean, I did rebuild myself, for starting off with myself, right? That's where I first started off with the thing that I could control. I couldn't control the finances. There's only so much money I can bring in, and there's only so much that I could pay off. And I couldn't afford my own place. So I focused on trying to lose the weight, working on my physical fitness. And that was really the catalyst to everything else in my life. I became so addicted to wanting to have like incremental improvements. Like I said, it first started with physical transformation. Then it said, okay, well, if I'm able to do this with my body, what else can I do? How can I change my mind? So I went down this path of reading personal development books and just wanting to do a complete 180 from the person that I was. And that's ultimately what led me to where I am today.
All right, so let's go back to the beginning. You had that start of a physical change. You start to like eat better and work out. Was there a psychological process right before that you cleaned up some thinking, you got rid of some scarcity mentality or negative self-talk, or placating emotions through food, right? These are common things. Did you have a conversation with yourself? Was there a dialectical type of thing, or did you just do it and then think about it later, like, oh, I just started doing that, and that's like, which, because they both can work, but people are looking for a way out. And what the entrance and exit doors are. And it's like, what was the thing that let you, aside from the pain, a lot of people could have just quit and given up on themselves. And if you didn't have self-respect, you might have, right? So there's people on that border, they don't have this self-confidence or self-respect yet. What are they looking for in that situation, as far as like, how do they egress?
So for me, it wasn't like, okay, I had this like aha moment where I'm like, you know what, I'm changing it. The change happened over time. And when I say over time, I'm talking about years. So I went through my first physical transformation. I'm like, wow, I feel great. I can, the shitty part is that like I said, I was broke. So I was always having to buy new clothes because I wasn't fitting in the clothes that I used to, that I was wearing. But like I said, it happened, over time. So the first transformation for me was like a 12-week period. And I think I lost like 50 pounds that first transformation session. And then after I was done with that program, I said, okay, well, I think the first book that I came across was Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant. And in that book, there was just so much, so many lessons learned in there in terms of like, you can achieve the things that you want to achieve as long as you put your mindset to it. And if you just follow that principle, that stuff, that principle can apply to really anything in your life. So I took the lessons learned from the discipline of having to eat correctly, having to, work out 3 times a day, which, I did my cardio in the morning, did my weightlifting in the afternoon, and then cardio again at the end of the night. And it just came down to just being a disciplined person. And that discipline is what, again, I used those lessons of overcoming those obstacles of not wanting to work out, working out when the weather was shitty outside, or whatever it may be, whatever excuses I decided to come up with, I just applied those same lessons to everything else in my life.
When you were in the state prior to your transformation, did you find that you had a lot of excuses not to do things, and that
Oh yeah.
you were buying your own excuses? Because I'm always trying to show students that, like, when you stop buying your own excuses, that's one part of it. And then when I know you won't quit on yourself when you have a goal, that's the other part of it. You put these two pieces together and it's like mixing epoxy. Like, you got something solid coming out of it.
Yeah, I still make excuses today, right? It's knowing when you are making those excuses to stop believing in your own bullshit and move on from your excuses. Now for me, like, I wake up every morning at 4:30. I'm at the gym by 5 o'clock. Every morning at 4:30, when that alarm clock goes off, I give myself excuses as to why I don't want to, why you don't have to go today. You could just go later. You'll go this afternoon. And what ends up happening is, first of all, I become much more miserable throughout the day when I don't work out. The afternoon, where I said to myself, hey, where I said early in the morning, hey, you can go in the afternoon, you end up not going. So it's just easier to get those things out of the way. Put yourself first thing in the morning. And I feel like that, that has a ripple effect throughout the rest of your day. So,
All right. Yeah, I agree. I'm the opposite. A lot of times I'm up working till 4:30 in the morning. I teach on Friday nights, and a lot of times it goes with Q&A till that time. When we podcast, it goes that time. So I'm not an early bird, but I'm going to go there with you right now because I'm open to change. And I got up early this morning. I had to get up early for something, and I can do that when I need to. But as part of being a free individual, like, this isn't the 1800s. We have electricity. We don't need to get up with the sun because it's our light source. So let me go there with you. It's 4:30 in the morning. You and Jocko Willink and 3 other people are up doing your workouts, trying to inspire other people. You've made several videos about Jocko. He's a very interesting character. I follow his podcast. I show him to the students at one point. I'm like, check out this mentality, because it's a no excuses, take ownership, extreme ownership, freedom through discipline type of mentality. That is a very useful thing. What interested you? How did you come across Jocko? What made you think, oh, I should take some of his words and like visualize them and help people internalize these important, potent messages? Tell me about that story.
yeah, no, that's a great question. So the first video that I did on Jocko was called Pawn. And this was at a time before he even had his podcast. He was just, his brand was just starting to get, become what it is today. And not really many people had heard about him. But I had taken a segment that he had done a Q&A off of Tim Ferriss's podcast. That's where that excerpt came from. But it was just a podcast. There was no visuals to it. So I listened to it and I said, man, I've got to, like, somebody's got to do a video on this. And I said, well, why not me? And so I downloaded the video or the audio, and I said, okay, I'm going to turn this into something. And I didn't know how, but I just ended up, tying in visuals that made sense based on what he was saying, about America and how great it is here. And that was really the birth of the videos that, that I make today. It was out of really trying to figure out how can I turn something that's not a video into a video, is how I evolved into the filmmaker that I am today. So,
all right. So that's like 5 years ago. And then more recently, you had a similar video called Deception with another popular podcaster. And I think it's also apropos. It's like people needed the visuals that go along with the words in order to understand. Like what you just said right there is like, Jocko's talking in the video about why America is exemplary. Well, a lot of people don't want to hear that message. But if you watch that video and you see the visuals with his words, you're like, oh, we got it pretty good here. It's not perfect. We can improve it, definitely. But look at what's going on in the rest of the world. And maybe we should buck up, put our big boy pants on and cowboy up to the situation and deal in a more masculine way with the problems that are going on in the world, instead of always being, woe is me, victim mentality. I'm shrinking violet. I can't learn anything. I'm helpless, right? That's where they want people to be. That's control. Your videos are helping people to cognitively liberate themselves. There we go. Cognitively
Yeah.
liberate themselves.
And to go
So
back
what,
to that pawn
yeah, go
video, I
ahead.
would say that somebody, I always say the military should use that as a recruitment video, because like you said, you get to the end of that video, not to like pat myself on the, on the back, but at least when I get through it, or when I got through watching the end of it, because that's the thing, is like, I never know what these things are going to turn into. I just start, it's like, the artist, I don't think usually goes in with intentions like, hey, I'm going to paint this masterpiece, right? But it ends up turning into that just through the creative process. But you watch the end of that video, or you get to the end of it, and it's like, man, I'm ready to sign up for the military, right? It's like, it's a powerful message for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience back in 2011. There was a rah video, and I was trying to like put some context on it. And we included it at the end of one of our episodes. And then like that thing that I was just like, let me tinker with this, became like this kind of spectacular few moments in time where people who didn't know such things then become informed. And I think that's like the key transition that happens within your videos. Like you have a wide palette. There's a whole lot. If you go, audience, if you go to Samuel Rivera's YouTube page, you're going to see his professional work. You're going to see his hobby work. There's a whole like wide palette, a cornucopia of content there. But the things that you're doing that are liberty and freedom related, you are taking someone who doesn't really understand that concept at the beginning, and then has a good granular detail why I want to look more into that topic by the end. And you're helping people shift those gears and transition through those couple minutes. They're not very long. A lot of them are like 3 to 6 minutes, right?
Yeah, even less
So,
than that sometimes. Yeah.
and there's a lot of work that goes into just those couple minutes, but what you can help people frame out in their minds is really powerful, and you're very succinct, and it's a cogent transmission of communication. So they're coming in with a small frame of reference. Almost every piece that I've seen that's not like a client piece of yours, you help people make a larger frame of reference around that idea. And that I think is more useful to them. It's like giving them handles for it so they can transfer it to other people. And in your case, you're like, just share the link. You can share this idea pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, they say, what's the old Chinese proverb, right? It's picture's worth 1,000 words. And if what's a video worth then? And that's really what it comes down to. Is like, you can hear something, right? But if you're able to take that same message and throw it into, throw some video on top of that, throw some music on top of that, and really get the person immersed into the message. I think that's why these videos have become so powerful, because a lot of the video clips too that I use, I try to, they sort of have double meanings, or the visual maybe not something, maybe a visual that it wasn't intended to be used. Like maybe sometimes I'll use like a movie clip, or sometimes I'll use, a snake as a metaphor for something that somebody might be saying. So I think that's what, and in an instant, when you see these visuals, you instantly know like, oh, okay, I get what he's saying with that. Right. So it's like less words with more visuals. So I think that's why, these things have been so powerful for people.
All right. Now comes the exciting part. You discovered how to talk in a new language that most other people just consume, but you learned how to be a producer of it, right? So you go to public school, you go one semester university, you do 20 years in the corporate world. When and how did you ever think that, oh, I could learn how to communicate visually and start doing these things? When did you learn cinematography and photography and editing and these sort of things in that journey?
So much like my physical transformation, my video transformation or my career transformation happened over time. So it wasn't like, I woke up one day and I had a camera in my hand. I said, that's it. I'm going to learn everything there is to learn. It just came over time, but it started off as a hobby. Right. So my wife, I remember she bought me like this small little compact camera that I wanted for my birthday. And I would just make like little family videos, right? And I used my family to make these fun videos that I never shared with the world. They're still, you can't find them anywhere. They're still private videos. But it was just like a fun hobby that I had. And one day at my jujitsu school, I said, my jujitsu coach was talking about doing like a belt promotion for the entire school. And I said, it'd be a really fun idea would be to like interview him. And then film the promotion and just kind of make like a cool video. That's all I wanted to do, is just make a cool video. And within the jiu-jitsu community, everybody kind of knows each other. And when I produced that video, everybody was like, wow, man, this is great. You should do more of these. It was, you know, the coach had a lot of positive things to say, very motivational. And that's what really led me down the path of wanting to do this as a career. But I didn't start off doing it as with intentions of like, hey, I'm going to turn this into a full-time career. I strictly did it as a hobby. And it wasn't until maybe like 6 or 7 videos later where a coach from a neighboring town reached out to me and said, hey man, I really love your work. I would love to hire you to do a video on me and on my coaches. And I'm like, and again, like I said, I didn't do this with intentions of like turning into a career. And I'm like, this guy wants to pay me I'm like, I'm willing to do this for free. And I had done everything for free up until that point. And that was really when the light bulb went off. I said, wow, like I can actually do something that I love, right? I can actually turn something that I love and get paid for it. So I went on this journey to try and, attain clients, try to, really turn this into a career. And with each video, I tried to make myself a better filmmaker, better editor. And over time, I would say, I started this at the tail end of 2015. And over time, I just, my skills developed into what they are today.
What equipment did you have when you first made that video for fun to just like do this thing that was cool? What did you have on hand?
It was a Canon S120. It was a small, I think under $200 camera. It didn't have a microphone input. It didn't have all the bells and whistles. It didn't, but it taught me 2 things. One, you didn't need to have all the fancy equipment to just get started. The hardest part is really just getting started.
Yes.
And I go back to, like I said, with my transformation, the hardest part was just getting started, getting into routine, becoming disciplined of wanting to become a better, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And so I started with that S120 thinking when I got that camera, I'm like, this is the greatest thing. This is such a professional camera. And when I got back with all the footage, I quickly learned I needed way more. Sounded like shit. It looked like shit. There's a lot of jump cuts. But I made it
You
work.
wouldn't have known that had you not taken the action.
Correct. If you would just wait for the perfect time, if I would have waited for the perfect timing, I would have never got started, right?
Yes.
Like even the camera equipment that I use now, there's always something better. But what's most important is that you just get started.
And you know how to use it and you actually use it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, everybody's got a camera, a camera that I had, a camera that's better than the one that I started with, which is pretty much your iPhone or Samsung, or whatever you use. These cameras are phenomenal. Start with that. If this is something that you want to do and you have, hey, I've got no money, whatever, like you've got a phone in your pocket right now that can film at better quality, probably even better audio than what I started with.
Yeah. And that's a good lesson right there. So first, I'm trying to help the audience lose their excuses for not taking action because they think, oh, I need the stuff. They always have like, and I know if I can help them overcome excuses and mitigate the obstacles, they'll be successful, right? So if they can get into action, that's one thing. They have to get rid of the excuse of I don't have the money, because they do. You got it in your phone. You got a phone in your pocket. Get a tripod for $30. You're in business. I had on location thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment. I forgot to charge my batteries, bro. And in the middle of the presentation, my whole setup goes down. My executive director, Joshua, he's got his Samsung on a tripod. He had 2.5 hours of like 4K footage of the whole thing. He saved my ass, right? So it taught me a good lesson. I went and got a new phone the next week, got a tripod. I use it all the time now in my productions. This low budget entry into this, should not be the thing that keeps you out of it anymore. It's like, no, I have that already. What's the next step? Then you have audio issues. You got, uploading issues. You got to learn how to edit. You have some obstacles, but at least you're started. And that's what I want to show people. You don't even need to know where you want to go with the skill, just to like do that thing that's fun. And it's like, oh, there's something there. We have to be taking actions to discover these things. It's like gold that's waiting there, but we got to chip. And if we chip and get gold, great. And if not, we get more rock, great. Keep going. Right. I think we're all 2 feet from gold.
Yeah, you're always, what does Gary Vee say? You're always one way, one video away from, I forget the exact saying, but if anybody follows Gary Vee, he has this saying that basically says you're always one video away from hitting massive success, essentially is the message that he's trying to say. And I truly believe that, and also going back to what you're saying, it's like, just get started and know that it's never going to be perfect. I look back at my old work and I cringe. I'm like, oh man, like that looks awful, but I needed to make
it means you've improved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's through those failures, some of my first client work, some of the stuff got so messed up and I'm like, oh, how am I going to ever fix this? But it was through those failures that you create, or you find new processes to hopefully avoid and navigate those failures. Right. So like my first big failure was on a client shoot where I was only shooting with one camera, and the SD card, I found out later when I got home, was all corrupted. It corrupted half the video. And I said, okay, well, what do I do here? So thankfully, I still had the audio track. I recorded a ton of B-roll and went back to the client, and half the video was salvaged because I had all that B-roll to rescue the half of the video. So, but it taught me, hey, Sam, you need to have backups, right? Bring 2 cameras with you the next time so that you could always, rely on that camera should something happen with the other, with the other one. So it's having these contingencies in place. And again, you could apply those lessons learned in life, right? It's like, why should you have a savings, right? It's like, so that, shit ever does go wrong, you've got something to rely on. Again, you could, apply these lessons to anything in your life.
Yeah, the lesson of redundancy. So if I were shooting an interview, I'm going to use 5 to 7 cameras with 3 audio sources, because I know at least 3 of those cameras, the footage is going to be throwaway. I'll have some nice selections for editing. I'm always light on the B-roll, so I'm always trying to get extra B-roll. What's your setup for redundancy? Like, I've had it bite me enough times that I'm like 3 audio sources or I'm not playing. And I've had arguments where I'm like, I'm going to take the train home right now and leave, unless we get because there's always like, oh, in this audio, you can hear the elevator running up and down the whole time because those shotgun mics pointed at the floor in the hotel and the concrete, right? So each one of these things. So camera angles and microphones. Yeah. These are serious production deals.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it all depends on the client shoot as well. So, so like, for example, one of my first client well,
I was speaking for interviews, but speaking a broader palette of like all the things you do, but I was just like, as an example. Yeah.
No, when I'm doing like a client interview, I've learned over time because of other shoots that I've done where there's background noises going on, people talking. It's like, you just completely messed up the interview. I had to reshoot. Right. And this is a 2-hour drive away from, and you know how it is around here, right? Like, yeah, 2-hour drive is miserable. It's not, it's not a fun drive. So, I had to go back and redo the interview. So what did that teach me? Okay, the next time I ever have a shoot where an interview needs to be done, it's going to be 100% quiet. Nobody's going to be there. We're going to do it off hours, and we're going to make sure that we have 2 audio sources. So that's my rule, minimum of 2 audio sources. I always shoot with 2 cameras. If I need a third, I'll bring it. But for the most part, I always just bring, 2 cameras. There's also times where, you can't get a place silent, right? I filmed on a battleship before, and there's all types of ambient noises going on, machines, air conditioners, tourists walking around, and there's just a lot going off. So what do you do in that case, right? So you have to do voiceover,
ADR it.
Yeah, you just have to ADR it. And I'll be honest with you, the first client that I ever needed to do that with, he's like, they ran the suggestion, well, why don't we do like, ADR? And I'm like, yeah, we could do. I had no idea what ADR was.
For those playing at home, automatic dialogue recording is usually, I mean, you are exposed to it all the time on the consumer end. So it's where everything's filmed on set or on location, and then they go in a studio and they mouth the words. They got the words in front of them and they re-say the words, but with a clear audio signal, and then they match it up. So it started in cinema because the audio and the video were naturally separate. So they had a lot of that back then, but they do it all the time today still. It has not expired. It's still useful, and it saves our asses all the time.
Yeah, it really does. And in certain cases, you have no choice but to do that. Mm-hmm. If you're filming in New York City, for example, in Times Square, like, you're never going to get it quiet there, right? So you need to get a clear audio source, and that's the only way to do it is through ADR.
And the backup is you can always muddy the background with like overlapping crowd noise so people don't notice those inconsistencies. But these are things you figure out usually after you make the mistake and you're trying to fix it, and it's not the right way to do it, like what Samuel just told you.
Yeah. No. So I screwed up my first,
That's how we all learn, bro.
Like, oh,
that's what I want the audience to get. You didn't go to UC Berkeley Film School or wherever they have like highfalutin film schools. Like you taught yourself how to do this, and now it's a high value skill set that you're rocking all the time. And you got a message that reaches into the freedom community, and now people are like, well, what's he all about? What's he doing? Because they need video production and editing and these sort of things too.
Yeah, and and lucky for me, like I started off as a hobby, and I was able to get the attention of some some big name influencers, and now I'm able to work with some of these influencers directly. But I would have never gotten to this point had I not just been willing to be a complete failure and not be scared of have fear of being not being perfect. Again, you look at my first video, it's awful. I still have it on my YouTube channel. And I put that on there, or I leave that on there as embarrassing
milestone,
just to show, hey, look, you can progress. If somebody ever wants to go down the rabbit hole, you can see the progression of video production level, really from video to video.
All right. So I got started in this sort of stuff. So I was podcasting first for a couple of years. So 2006, 2008, then I said, I need to get the message to the audience visually. I don't know how to do that. Well, let me get a camera. Let me start learning. Let me start editing video. I made my first films in 2007, 2008. And then it was like, I wanted to get better equipment because I noticed the shortcomings of like the consumer $100, $200 type stuff. So
right.
I remember practicing at one point. I took my parents still had like a bunch of Star Wars stuff I had when I was a kid. My brother had it for his kids, right? So his kids were young. I said, bring all the toys to grandma and grandpa's garage. I set up like a 5-camera shoot with lights and microphones. And I just went through the whole first movie with them with all the toys, and we blew up the Death Star at the end, but I filmed it all. So in that cut, that's just like a family movie I made. My dad's working the jib crane. My brother's got like the steady cam, all my equipment. I was trying to learn how to use it before I went and used it on a client set. Right. So the first things I filmed were, I was filming for money in order to get more money to buy more equipment. So I would film concerts, and I knew a guy that was like a band manager, and he was booking all over, and he's like, go film these bands and I pay you money. So I got a lot of good experience standing there for 6 hours with steady cam and like 3 other stationary cams, and then editing like bar noise and all this crazy ambient stuff and trying to make productions. And I was doing that while I was podcasting and doing this sort of thing. And then it kind of formulated into, I was listening to John Taylor Gatto audio, and I'm like, I want to see video of this guy. I want to see clear video with clear audio and good lighting, because he never has it, and he always has something important to say. So I was like, I'm going to offer this guy. And I went for 6 months trying to get in touch with them. And then this DVD set, we shot like July 4th weekend, 2011. I had friends from all over the country flying to help me. We're learning how to use the cameras on the fly. I had like some Canon camcorders with tapes, and then I had a 7D. Oh, wow. I had a 7D on set, but I didn't know how to set the exposure, and it was shitty footage.
Overblown.
So it was overblown. It didn't work out. Basically my cameraman, I was like, you got to push this button, get the red dot, make sure the red dot's on the whole time. That's all the training they had. So in like hour 2, I'm out of frame, I'm out of focus, and I'm like, how am I going to edit this? And then my little voice is like, nobody's watching you, dude. Cut back to Gatto. Like, so I learned how. So it took me like 6 months to work out the mistakes I made on production, because I couldn't do a retake. And then I went through that learning experience. The other one I did was I shot an interview with the NSA director, tech director, Bill Binney. And I had like this really good set that we rented out, like a big former like silk mill owned by the Cheney family. It was like good historic set. We had like these brilliant windows with lights coming in. I had all these people helping me that day. I get home with the footage, and I'm like, it's overblown. And then the white balance changes all day throughout the interview, and I didn't do enough, white balance cards. And I tease myself. I'm like, you almost had a mental breakdown trying to fix that footage, to teach myself, like right after that project, I went and learned basic photography. And I was like, if I can get it right in still frame, I can also do it for cinematography. And then I've never had situations like that because I got a lot more adept at what I was doing. Because I'm like, these are one-time interviews, dude. I can't be messing around for 6 months trying to fix footage because I didn't film it right that day. Because I also wore too many hats. So everybody would they'd be like, can I help? Can I help? Not now. It's too late now. I got to plug all this stuff in. We got to get like, clock is ticking. So did you ever have any of those situations where it's like trial by fire, or were all situations kind of trial by fire like that?
Yeah, I would say everything. I mean, I've mitigated a lot of that, but everything when I first started was just trial by fire. I remember, and so when I first started creating videos, I really didn't know like exactly what direction I wanted to go with. And it's funny because to this day, people are like, "Oh, what do you do, for a living?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm a videographer and filmmaker." And like, "Oh, so you do weddings?" And it's like, oh, there's more to
Not if I
video
can
than
help
just.
it.
Yeah. So, but one of my buddies wanted me to do his wedding, and I'm like, I was used to doing like interviews, B-roll, that kind of stuff. And at the time, I'm like, man, this is as hard as it can get. I said, a wedding, that's gonna be easy. Well,
Yeah.
did I learn quickly that it's not easy? And I made a lot of mistakes, including messing up their vows. Now, there's no retakes on that, right? You can't get the bride to go down the aisle again. You can't get them to say their vows again. So I got home. What happened was all the audio was just completely overblown, right? It was peaking, I don't know. It was probably like plus 20 decibels.
Jeez.
So it's completely distorted. I said, there's just no, I sent it to the audio engineer. He's like, dude, there's just no information to fix this. So I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, this is their day. So, the way that I presented it to my friend and his wife, I said, look, here's what happened. Right. I don't know how it happened. And at that point, that was the truth. I didn't know how it got screwed up. And, I said, but here's what I'm going to do. I've got a lot of B-roll from your wedding. What I want you to do is, redo your vows. And what I'll do is I'll cover it up with I'll make it into like a montage. To make a long story short, that's what I did. I went to their house. I re-recorded their vows, using a lapel mic, and I took all that audio and I made it into like this beautiful montage that they were they were like, wow, we were so blown away with what you did. And I'm like, thank God, because this could have been a complete nightmare, more for them than for me. But it taught me that, listen, man, the failures that you go through is what you make it, right? Like, you can really overcome a situation, as long as you're looking at it through the right lens. Like, how can I solve this issue? How can I fix it? And how can I extract those lessons and apply them to new things in life, to new obstacles that I run into?
Yeah. If you had a course on how to shoot wedding videos, that'll be one of the things. It's like, oh, you want to know what to do if you miss their vows? Because you can either do what you did, or my idea when you said it was, you could have them narrate over all the footage. So it would be like the bride and groom looking back at their wedding and then capturing that audio. That would pass too. So now you got two strong options for the people who have the biggest fear. That's the biggest F up in the whole thing, right? Now you got two strong ways to handle that, and you got it for the rest of your life because you went through that. That's also valuable to others to find those things out, man. So don't do a wedding how-to video type thing. And I
Yeah.
also stay away from it because it's too high tension. They have expectations that are unrealistic. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I leave it to the specialists. I recommend other people to do it. And I filmed one wedding. I learned enough, and I've never had to, thankfully, take money for filming a wedding again.
Yeah. A buddy of mine, he does it full time. He loves it. But he learned, being, I guess, as he had an internship with somebody else that,
Had a
that was,
system.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he figured out their system, or learned their system. And he went on to do it on his own. So, listen, the information's out there. It doesn't matter what you want to be. I would say, outside of like, becoming a lawyer or becoming a brain surgeon or something serious like that, like, you could pretty much learn anything you want to learn online, right? Like, my whole career is based on, if YouTube gave me a certificate, it would be here, right? That's where I got all my knowledge from, was just trial by fire, and also learning how to fix those problems that I created for myself, by, just watching YouTube videos. Okay, how do I avoid that in the future? What should I have done? And then, as I became more and more comfortable as a filmmaker, then I eventually, like you said, like, you were saying with your one video, like it was overexposed. You didn't know how to use the camera. When I first started, everything was on automatic settings. And I had such a great fear of learning, how to operate a camera, with the manual settings.
Yeah, you got to have that focus triangle, man, going on.
Yeah, man. It's, well, beyond that, it's like, how do you properly, expose something? How do you not underexpose it? How do you make sure that your Kelvin
I meant the
temperature is right?
exposure triangle. Thank you for correcting me. I was like, why does he not get that? I'm like, oh, because I said the wrong word. That's why. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I took a course, and and it was like a $30 course, and that elevated my game to new heights. So it's just
off
like
auto.
Yeah,
It just allows you to switch to one of those other modes now with confidence.
Yeah.
Right. If you're in a place and you want the aperture to have like good depth of field, nice bokeh, then you might go to aperture value as priority. And those are things, because you shoot Canon. I looked in your video before I even invited you. I'm like, if he shoots Nikon, he can't come on the show. No, I'm just kidding. But I saw you shot Canon. I'm like, I got a lot of Canon equipment over the years.
Yeah.
So learning how to use the equipment in these situations is paramount. That one that I had overexposed, it was a 4th or 5th camera, so we didn't use it. We also didn't use the slider shot from that day because it didn't work out, right? So you always have to have like what you need to get the job done. And then it's like, if you're learning to use some other stuff experimentally, R&D, though, you make those extra redundancies, but never depend on those. Oh, the card was bad. We gotta, we lost all the data from primary camera. You do need backups if you're charging clients money. Otherwise, you're going to have customer service issues.
Yeah. Or if you don't want to use that as your backup, let's say, right away, go offer, to make a quick, like, I don't know, B-roll video for a local pizzeria, right? Like I can go right now, like if I want to test a new piece of equipment, and I don't really, I don't want to, I don't know, my wife doesn't want me to film her brushing her hair. Like, okay, fine. I'll go to the local pizzeria. Like, hey, I would love to do this video. I'll do it. No charge.
Yeah.
It's all for you. And it'll be great. A great learning experience on how to use that. Now
camera. Let's use that as a live real-time example. You're going to need the process of making the pizza. You're going to want to talk to someone who owns the establishment a little bit, and maybe a testimonial from someone who's eating the good pizza. And then they can use that on social media and post it at lunchtime. And people from local businesses come and eat at their restaurant, and they get money, and then they can keep hiring you to do that great thing that you do for them. Right.
Right. It's no different than when you go to the mall, right? And they've got the little, outside of the, what's it called?
Food court, where they give you little samples.
Yeah, the little samples. This is the little sample. Like, hey, I made this quick, and I can't tell you how many free videos I've done where they turned into clients. It doesn't always work out, but it's either a learning experience or sometimes they turn into a client. Like, hey, we would love for you to do this. And worst case scenario, even, or it's not really worst case scenario, like you said, on top of the, you're making this free video for somebody that's going to potentially turn into a client. You also ask them, hey, like when it's done, can I get a testimonial from you? So now you've got a testimonial, you've got a sampling of work. He could tell you, give a testimonial how this video improved his business, how did it funnel in clients, and it's a win-win-win. So,
and then you ask that business owner, do you know one other business owner who needs this service for them that I just provided for you? And they're like, yeah, I got a buddy here. Go over there, and you work in your referrals too.
And here's the sneaky thing about when you ask the question in that way, is that I found that if I say, hey, I would love to do video work for you. Do you have anything? A lot of times, sometimes people will be like, I'm not really, they become guarded. They don't want to be sold. But when you phrase it the way that you just did, hey, do you know anybody? A lot of times I found that they're like, yeah, I actually do. How much to do something like this? And then boom, there you go. You got a client.
And you don't know if you don't ask, and people can't take offers you don't make.
Exactly. And again, if you're going in there for free, because you really want to, learn this skill, I mean, who's going to turn that down? Worst case scenario is you make the video, it sucks, you never send it to them, or they never use it. Like there's really
this is a great point. Let's break this open a little bit. That fear of rejection, the fear of failure, all these things that public school programs us to fear, those are actually they're very necessary. They're very necessary for success. So I teach students to get over that fear. It's like, go out and collect 10 failures this week. Because on your way to 10 failures, I bet you get 1 or 2 successes, and then you break out of that, right? So, if I send 1,000 offers out and 995 people say no, but 5 people said yes, and it's $5,000 a pop, that's a good, like, I want those people that weren't interested, to get to the people who are interested. So it's just part of the terrain. It's like hills. When you're walking, there's hills and valleys, like you're uphill or downhill sometimes, and sometimes you got to make the offer and sometimes you got to receive the offer. But if you're not, if there's no heartbeat, if you're not taking any action, you're not giving the opportunity to the market to respond. So let's talk about, like, did you have like an aversion to failure at the beginning of this, or were you like, I'm just going to do this, and I don't care about the failures? How did you get over that to help other people get over it for themselves?
So for me, I've been a little bit lucky in terms of, you mean like with acquiring clients or with like just putting out content? I guess I'll answer both
Just the
questions.
fear of failure or
Yeah.
acceptance. Like, it could be either for social media or for clients in person.
Yeah. So, I guess the way that I got over, fear of failure is just, I guess I've never really had that to, if I'm being completely honest with you, I was never like, hey, I never want to make this video because I think people are going to laugh at it or something like that. That my bigger failure, and sort of is still to this day, is like always having to like, the need to like cold call like clients, right? That was always something that still to this day, like I don't like doing, right? I don't like having to pick up the phone like, hey, I'm, Sam Rivera from, Nutley, New Jersey, and I'm the best videographer in town. Would you like to hire me? Like, I guess the way that I overcame that obstacle was just putting out my body of work and allowing the clients to sort of come to me. So I've sort of been a little bit lucky with being able to use my personal brand, to convert clients into, or turn fans into clients that want to work with me. So
Cool. And now let's talk on the flip side, fear of success. Is there any parts of you that kind of procrastinate or avoid doing because you're like, I don't want to grow too fast? These are stories I tell myself all the time. That's why I'm asking, to see if that goes on with you too.
yeah, so I guess the next obstacle for me is building out a bigger team, and there's a lot of fear that comes with that. But a good friend of mine has a saying. He's like, Sam, it's not the monster that you think it is, right? So my first fear, for growth, or towards growth, was like, signing up for my own business, right? Starting an LLC. And to me, I'm like, oh my God, like that's like such a big deal. But once you learn how to figure it out, which is really not that hard, like you learn to realize it's really not the monster that you thought it was. Like once you do it, once you take the first step, it's really not that hard. And again, this applies to anything, right? It's like, it's usually taking the first step that's the hardest, right? Fear of failure, that's preventing you. It's that, just again, taking that first step is paramount.
Right. Good. You're good at having ideas and getting them into action. For other people's, there's more space in there because they got that fear of failure. If we can help them dissolve that, they can close the gap on that, have an idea, take action, start seeing more results. Now, I want to unfold this idea of the fears around, the trepidation around systematization. Now, you did a good job. You explained, it's like, hey, LLC, not that hard, right? Like, we've done that in the last 2 years. I think it started as LLC and then we made it into an S corporation. But you have to know who to call, what to say, what to expect as far as what to pay, and then how to make that thing pay off for itself like gangbusters, because it's supposed to be the cornerstone of a business where you're launching, right? So someone in your situation wears all the hats. You're editing, you're filming, you're planning, you're recruiting for new business. You're trying to do all these things and run a business and all the bureaucracy and tech stack and your website and all this great stuff, right? So it stresses people out and they crash and burn, right? Not a Top Gun reference, though. I was in a meeting last hour with 2 people who had never seen Top Gun. I was like, are you guys from another planet? Because you're like almost my age. What's up? But in this situation, people under the pressure, they say, like, when someone's drowning, they don't yell for help because they're too under duress, right? So businesses go crush all the time because they can't figure out how to systematize and delegate fast enough and ring the cash register often enough at prices high enough to stay in business. And this part right here is something you probably want to keep your hands on. This part over here, where it's like distribution, marketing, all these other areas, accounting, you need to figure out. Now, the challenge is someone like you goes to the internet and says, okay, I need a bookkeeper. or I need blank. Now you're finding disparate people who don't have a culture of excellence, who don't have necessary integrity, who's not going to talk to each other. They're going to charge you all different prices, right? So I saw that problem as a business owner and I was like, this sucks. And as a consultant, I needed a referral network of all these people consistently for clients, right? So in season 1 of Autonomy, my partner, Joshua Hale, had a marketing company. I had a consultancy. We combined those two together. And then we started screening graduates from the Autonomy course. And we created a marketing company called Autonomy Unlimited. So I say marketing, but we really help with that hat delegation problem, right? And we're pretty much exclusively helping people who are liberty and freedom minded, because I don't need to go helping some multi-billion-dollar corporation to get better at what they're doing. I want to help small businesses stay in business, because I think entrepreneurism is like the root of freedom. And in places where you don't have freedom, there's no entrepreneurism. And in places where you don't have entrepreneurism, there's not much freedom. So I think they're kind of tethered together. And someone like yourself, who's like a do-it-yourselfer, a bootstrapper, who's not waiting to be told what to do, would be really empowered. Just like do a discovery call, find out which of these areas, and we could say, well, here's 3 people that you could talk to. And then whichever area you want to systematize or delegate, could be your newsletter. Like at this point, I'm 3 years into this. So I've delegated almost everything I do except for production. I'm here for 6 hours Friday night, 6 hours Sunday night, 4 hours Sunday afternoon. And then the rest of the week, I'm just on a headset doing calls. I delegated my editing, post-production, upload, distribution, newsletter, accounting, like all that good stuff by now. So I just pay 1 fee per month. I have a weekly meeting with all those people. They go do all those things and things work like really well. It's like shifting out of first gear into third gear, right? So you're going to have more speed, but lower RPMs. And I think that, yeah, I would definitely open that opportunity to you. And as far as like, you got skills and work trade, like there's like, you could do value for value, bro.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. And you know, just to kind of jump off of what you were saying, it's like figure out what the best ROI is on your time, right? So if if your passion and what you're trying to build is, XYZ, don't work on the ABC, right? Don't work on the accounting side. Like source that out to somebody else.
Yeah, let me learn how to use QuickBooks. No, the answer is find someone who's better than me. That's what you want to do. You want to delegate up and systematize up on all these things. Find someone who's better than you at all these things.
Right. But also to somebody that might be just starting off, don't be afraid of learning the QuickBooks, right? Because here's the other side to that, is that if you don't know the QuickBooks, or at least how it sort of works, you can easily be misled by somebody that does understand it, or tell you, oh, it's way more complex, and it's really not that hard, right? So understanding the basics of each one of those things. But once you get to a point where your business is growing and you don't need to necessarily be entering in QuickBook entries and uploading receipts and so forth, hand it off to somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah. Look at what's the best ROI of your time.
Yeah. And another way to do that is like estimate what are you worth per hour, and then look at anything you're doing. You might be mowing grass or fixing the plumbing or doing all any of these things around the house. It's like, no, maybe you should delegate that and come up with your next best marketing campaign, or get your next big client, right? Or any of these things that are like game changers for your year, instead of like doing this. And you can provide jobs for people all over the place.
Sure.
Right. So I used to be like really hands-on, do it yourself, but now it's like, I'll do what's necessary and outsource the rest, because this is a lot better momentum and acceleration capabilities.
Yeah, 100%. I've handed off tons of video editing jobs where I'm like,
it's below
I don't want to say it's below my pay scale, but it's it's like I could be focusing on my personal brand, or working on this bigger client project or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's one thing I did want to say that we were sort of talking about, before, with like perfection, right? If you're somebody that's looking, waiting for the perfect time, for the perfect gear, for the perfect whatever it is, and this, take this, whether you want to become a videographer, filmmaker, or not, whatever industry it is that you're trying to jump into. When you look at professionals, right? Professionals, I'm putting this in quotes. At least for me, I always thought that they had this certain level of excellency, right? Of greatness. They've got it figured out. They know how to avoid all the mistakes and the pitfalls and so forth. I can't tell you how many big client jobs I get from professional filmmakers where they send me the footage and I'm like, what the hell did they just send me?
Right.
So even the guys that we think are the greats are probably the most flawed, because a lot of the footage that I've gotten back from some of these big clients look like they came from somebody that just started.
But you wear one of the hats that saves the day. It's called the editor, and they are taking like something that's not usable and then making it into something profound as they're living.
I think we have the wrong name, wrong title. It shouldn't be video editor. It should be more like problem solvers.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all about problem solving. If you're in a conversation with someone, they got a problem and you're going to give them a resource to help them out, and you don't make the agreement to follow up with them or a time they're going to do it, we're not closing them. So when I teach the students sales, I'm like, look, it's just high value problem solving, because you're not dealing with trivial stuff. You're dealing with high value stuff. It's an introduction. It's a building of rapport. It's a finding of what the problem is. It's making a better plan and then making an agreement. This is a better plan than what you had. Let's take action on it tomorrow. We'll have a follow-up meeting. We'll get these documents together, whatever the next step is, right? And that should be done in our personal life, our professional life. It should be done all over the place, because we got a lot of problems to solve. But notice that they don't give that to us in the 15,000 hours of schooling. That problem solving that I can teach people in 2 weeks, like in a couple of lectures, they have a good solid grasp on it for the rest of their life.
Yeah. I think another lesson is also never to like sell somebody something that they don't necessarily need.
100% agreed.
Right. I've had, part of being a problem solver is figuring out, hey, like I've had clients come to me and they're like, hey, I need this video because it's gonna, I need it to do this and this. And I'm like, you don't need a video. What you need is this. I think you should talk to this guy instead. And what you end up doing is building a level of trust. They refer you to somebody else. And it's like, you're not selling somebody something, because here's the flip side. Yeah, you could take that easy paycheck. Like, yeah, I'm going to make the video for this guy. But then they become disappointed when they don't get the results that they were looking for. And then you become the bad guy. So I found that it's just better to like, just be completely honest with whoever you're speaking with during the sales process or during the discovery process, and really be more like a friend to them. And like, hey, this is what I think you really need. You don't really need my services, if that's what you truly believe.
No,
So
100%. That's the same as I teach. It's basically, you have to make the connection and go through a conversational process where you're listening and make that identification, because otherwise, like what I teach is like, you're going to problem solve in every conversation. And sometimes those people will end up purchasing your product, but a lot of times you're going to send them to the competitor who does the thing that they actually need. Or you're going to send them off and say, you're not even ready for this. Here's a good prerequisite, right? So it's about serving each person in that individual instance, being present, listening to them, having a real genuine interaction, being curious so you can ask questions and actually hear the answers. And then if you do that consistently, all the other stuff comes from that, right? Water naturally wants to go downhill. If we just move the stuff that's in its way, it's going to do its thing. So all that high pressure closing and the techniques that people push, like it's a bunch of BS. And I've never found it necessary in my entire career to do anything like that.
yeah, I always thought that sales was that. It wasn't
Yes.
until like, when I say recently, I want to say within a couple of years, where I thought it was that. I learned that it's like, nobody likes to be pressured, right, into buying anything or to doing something. When you speak to another person, like that's on the other end, as like a friend or as another human, like you're trying to look out what's in their best interest. Not
it's like a fiduciary position. You're looking out for their best interest, and it's not about yourself. It's about providing service to someone else. The way I teach the art of sales is it's something you do for someone. Whereas people like us, before we knew about it, it's like you thought sales is something that's done to you, right? They do these things to you. I took a sales course a couple of years ago just to brush up, because I'd done it for my professional career, but then I'd been an entrepreneur. So I was like, let me take, Dan Locke's high ticket sales course. Oh, they teach you how to close people in one call. You don't have time to do research or say maybe or any of these types of things. They want you to mitigate that. So I would never use the techniques I learned in that course in reality, right? So I consider that not the best course, because it's not dealing with reality. Whereas what I teach is like, you're going to be surrounded by problems you don't know how to solve. You're going to be ad hoc, making up solutions all the time. Here's a method. And then here's a method of communication to get that method of problem solving into action. And then when you learn how to do that, it's not about pushing, persuading, convincing, conniving, any of that high pressure stuff. It's about making a genuine human connection, looking out for each other's best interests, helping us to solve problems. Because when you build trust with that person, that's the real currency. And that's done through demonstrating integrity consistently through time. That's not done by taking the short buck today and hoping they don't find out tomorrow, right? That's what people do when they don't know any better or they don't care. And that's not the group of people that you and I work around.
Right. No, 100%, man. I couldn't have said it better. But in your opinion, do you think that those tactics apply to regardless of what business you're trying to get into? So for example, like you and I are in the service-based industry, right? We're here to, I create videos for people, you're servicing. Do you think that same principles apply to, like, let's say in somebody that's selling a product, right? Like, let's say I'm in, water bottle sales, right? Like, do you think that helps? Like, you're obviously not going to do research on the person. You get where I'm going with
Right,
this?
right, right.
Like,
So if you wanted to come up with, you got a water bottle company and you come to me and say marketing, I'm going to say, do you want to be the cheapest water bottle or the best water bottle? Because I'm going to tell you what, at cheapest, you got no money for marketing and you got a whole lot of people who want to be the cheapest, give them poison in the water bottle itself type thing. It's made out of poisonous stuff, right? Or if you go up here to the people who appreciate their health and don't want BPA and all this other stuff, and you thoughtfully put into your product, it's a premium, it's a luxury thing. And that group of people does buy things, and you do have money to roll back into your marketing to make a presence for yourself. Maybe you then get some celebrity placement and they see some other people who are smart, conscious people using that type of device in their life, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can go, but I first like try to paint out, like, here's the territory. Where do you want to go? Oh, I want to be the lowest price. Well, let me tell you what comes with lowest price. Person across the street lowers their price too. And before you know it, you're both out of business and it's for rent, right? So it's like, let's go back to the drawing board. You want to stay in business. Here's what staying in business looks like. It looks like marketing is not an expense. It's a necessity. And when done right, it's a one-to-many return, like having a transmission in a car. You can get out of first gear for once in your life. But most people, first gear, paycheck land, it's like, it's not going to, you're going to run into the red line of the RPMs.
yeah. And that's a problem with, like, going back to what you were saying before with, like, current education is like, this is stuff that they don't teach you they don't teach you entrepreneurship. I wish they did. I think there should be a course in high school on how to run a business, how to,
Yeah.
balance your checkbook. Like, none of that stuff is taught to you. You kind of just, you're just sent into the wild. I mean, I guess now they're more, prioritizing teaching kids about drag queens than anything, right? Which is, I mean, that's a whole nother topic on itself.
Oh yeah.
But
So did you have anyone in your family that ran their own business, or where did you get the entrepreneurial? Like, how did you think you could actually do it on your own and not take the paycheck?
So no, nobody. Well, I'm semi-lying. My grandfather had a construction business, growing up, but he lived far away. So I wasn't really like in the weeds in terms of like how he operated his business. So no, I would say I'm probably the first entrepreneur in my family. My mom still works for somebody. My dad does, my wife works for somebody. So
Me too. All right. So we got that in common. And
yeah.
now, did you have anyone cast doubt on your abilities to make it on your own? Like, my parents got me with it once and I turned down a job, and then I later had to go back and actually like take that position. But I believed them. I was like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I should work on the crew and learn how to do, right. And then the second time they tried to do that, I was like, no, I'm going this way. And so it's people say you're not going to have healthcare, you're not going to have the stability. How are you going to get credit? All these things, like you're self-employed and the numbers would work differently. Anyone
It
try
was
to throw
more,
that fear? And
yeah,
like
it
you
was
cut through
more,
it?
not so much when the business, when I decided to do this full time, because my wife was like 100% supportive. Like, when I first was thinking about not going back to work, I
Yeah.
said, my wife's like, you got this, like you can 100% do it. But years prior, when I first started doing, started filmmaking, like people, like even my mom, she was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you're filming somebody? Like, they didn't get it. But as I started to see that, like, hey, you know what, this could potentially turn into something, whether it's my personal brand exploding and turning into something, or I am able to acquire a bunch of clients that I get to work for, for my own business. It wasn't until I saw, that I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel where this could potentially turn into something that, that they started to as well. But again, when I first started doing this as a hobby, like, nobody understood, like, what the hell I was even doing. And to be honest with you, neither did I. I was still trying to figure it all out. So, yeah, I had some doubt. I had some naysayers. But everybody sort of became super supportive after they started to see, like, hey, okay, I see there's some potential here.
All right. So, as far as like getting business in the beginning, how did you get your first jobs? And then how do you get your jobs on a recurring basis these days? Like, what do you got to keep it rolling? Cause you got responsibilities. How do you keep it in momentum?
Yeah. So for me, a lot of my personal brand stuff is what funnels in a lot of clients. So that's sort of my, my marketing. Outside of that, a lot of the business that I acquire is really not new clients. It's repeat clients.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
it's it listen, there's two paths, right? You could take. It's either, how do I get new clients, or how do I retain those same clients that I like to work with, they like to work with me, and building that level of trust with them where they want to, continue to use my services for their business. So I have a small group of clients, but they give me a lot of business, repeat business.
Now that's a key there, because people might have said, well, I'm just going to film weddings. How much repeat business do you think you're getting at as a cinematographer or videographer for a wedding? Almost none.
No.
Maybe one of them like you and they use you in the second marriage, but unlikely, right?
Right.
So it's like you are dealing with people who have a need now, not just today, but on a recurring basis. And that's a much more strategic and tactical way to interact with this market, rather than sitting back and say, hey, I'm open for business. Who wants to film something this week? Which is what most people do.
Right. And there's nothing, listen, if you want to do the weddings, there's nothing wrong with that. Just understand the obstacles that, and the things that come along with that, right? When are weddings usually done? Weekends, right? Do you want to be somebody that works weekends every weekend for the rest of your life? No? Okay, then maybe you should try and, go down a different avenue. Listen, this business, there's, again, most people think that, hey, like, they associate videographer, filmmaker with weddings, but it's such a broad spectrum.
Right.
Like there's so many different options. You could specialize in certain things. Like don't come to me to make your, Coca-Cola can commercial. Like that's not what, there's product placement, product commercials. That's not what I do. Right. So again, that's just, one of many different things that you could do with the camera. And really the possibilities are endless.
Do you ever watch any Jesse Driftwood videos?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you said filming a product like that, I'd already thought of him like, oh, I wonder if he's watched it. Cause he does a lot of good stuff with like smartphones and stuff. I was like, this is like cutting edge. So I'm always trying to keep up with what the kids are doing.
Yeah.
It's pretty slick.
I've done product placement for clients. And here's the thing is that I've done it for clients that were already existing clients, and they came to me like, hey, we want to do this. And again, just like we were saying before, just being completely transparent, being honest, and explaining to them, hey, here's what I can do. Here's my limitations. If you're looking for something that looks like that CGI Coke commercial with your boxing glove, that I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's not
but
we
can introduce you to who does.
Right. We could, right. Exactly. Yeah. Or, and again, it's understanding what are their budgets. So they might want to do that CGI Coke commercial, but maybe their budget's only $1,500.
Yeah. And that's 75 grand. So you just show them like, yeah, I know who does that. And I called them and they said 75 grand, and you're like $1,500 all day. Thank you very much. And you're done. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's what I can do for $1,500.
Right.
So it's not trying to like, the first thing that I sort of say to clients, like, what's your budget? Right. And I immediately say, it's not because I'm trying to see how much money I can get out of you. I'm trying to understand which direction do we want to go? Like, hey, do you want helicopters and, F-16s and Tom Cruise in your video? Cool. We can make that happen. Oh, but you've only got a $2,000 budget. Yeah. Okay. Well, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to get, we're going to get Hot Wheels.
We got a drone and we got some Hot Wheels.
Yeah. And some stock footage. Here's what we can do. So again, it's just having those honest conversations with them and building that level of trust.
Yeah. I like to like take care of what they're looking for and then try to get them out of their comfort zone a little bit in some area. And I don't make them pay for that, but I'm also going to R&D, use something new in that area. And if it works out, cool. And if not, no big deal. But I always I always make sure like I give them exactly what they're looking for first, and then say, have you considered this, this, or this? And they say, well, that's interesting. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to charge you for it. I haven't flown the drone before. I might crash it. As long as I don't crash it into you. Is that cool? All right, great.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. That goes back to saying like, okay, so how we were talking about like testing new equipment, right?
Yeah.
That'd be a perfect opportunity. Like you're not going to charge them, but you explain to them like, hey, whatever, I don't know how to fly a drone, but if it works out, great. We have this extra thing. And if it does work out and you figured out how to use the tool, then now you could use that for future projects. Now you can build somebody for.
Yeah. And then the other example would be like in a wedding, you know, you want to have standard shots of her coming down the aisle, these sort of things. But you could also say, look, I see that trolley over there. It's got wheels. I'm going to put a tripod and a cameraman on that trolley. It's a long lens, and I'm going to have them just dolly it back. But you're not going to see it. It's just going to happen over here. But if this works, it's going to look epic, you know? And they were like, oh yeah, I don't want anything over there. I don't want, or yeah, do that. No one's going to look over there and see that, you know, during that time. They're all going to be looking at the bride, which is the right answer, by the way, and take that experimental shot and see if you can get it to work.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I try and do that with most of my shoots now. Like, I mean, less now. I'm not really flying like drones or anything like that, but I'll try and do things that level up my production. So maybe I try a new technique or try something with different lighting, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I'll tell you, the times that it does work and I like it, ends up becoming part of my style, and then that's why, you know, clients will come to me because they want that, you know, specific thing. But it would have never happened had I not been willing to try and fail at, you know, at something.
Yeah. And I think that when we try those things and fail, when we find that one thing that works that we can keep using in the future, that also reinitiates us trying and failing in other areas going forward. Cause it's like every now and then it pays off. It's like a slot machine, only it's a slot machine of self.
And
Is
better
gonna
odds,
work, you
but
know? Yeah, you got better odds. It's not rigged, and you get to keep like everything, you know.
yeah,
You've already got it internal. You just need to transact it through action, you
right.
know. And I
Yeah.
think the whole growth of like self-learning and being in the moment and dynamic interactive feedback and communication, like, you know, it's different than just like doing stuff on the internet. You're out in real life dealing with real people and real physics of situations and real lighting that changes, and you have to be pretty cerebral to do what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. It's you know, understanding how to operate the tools, right? It's no different than a carpenter or, you know, a plumber, whatever. Like, there's different, you know, the right tool for the right job, and understanding the scenario that you're dealing with. So what we do is really no different than that.
All right. Well, I'd like to get more familiar with your work in the client world. I'm going to look at some of your portfolios. What would you direct the audience to? What are the top 3 videos you want them to see coming out of this interview?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would gear them towards, or steer them towards looking at some of my personal brand stuff. Just maybe looking at Joe Rogan Freedom. That video went super viral. Joe's, you know, he shared it. You know, he shared it in the past. He's actually shared several pieces of my work. I would steer them towards that. That would give them a good idea of like the type of videos, you know, that I make. In terms of client work, you know, I've got them on my website, samuelriverafilms.com. If you look under the Our Work tab, you'll see, you know, some of my work, and then some of the work that I've done for clients, like Teddy Atlas. You know, I work now with David Meltzer. You know, there's some pretty big names that I've worked with in the past, and you could see that in my portfolio right on my website.
Well, it's fantastic because, like, aside from doing Grand Theft World podcast, I teach a course and I have a marketing company, and the marketing company has clients, and some of those clients need services from you that we don't provide ourselves. And I want to figure out how to identify those situations and put them into play more readily. So we'll continue the conversation, but I want to thank you for your investment today or tonight. We're pretending this is Sunday night, everybody. This is not a pre-taped interview.
And, it is a pre-tape.
Yeah. Well, I was being facetious. This is not a pre-taped interview. Yeah, this was totally pre-taped. What's today? Like Wednesday during the week. This is when Samuel was available, everybody. He's not up late Sunday nights. He's got a life. All right. So
if the daylight wasn't a dead giveaway.
Yeah, right. And then plug your film site again, samuelriverafilms.com. What are people going to find on there, and what's the action they take when they get there to contact you?
Yeah. So if you're looking to create a video for your business, your brand, you know, just visit my website, samuelriverafilms.com, go to the contact page, and let's get in touch in terms of and find out what it is that you're looking for, and see if there's you know, an opportunity for me to help you. Sometimes, you know, what you're, like I said earlier in the conversation, sometimes what you need is not a video. Maybe you need something else, and I'd be happy to have that conversation with you and figure out what it is that you may or may not need.
Yeah, they might need a website, a landing page, lead magnet, all these other things that we provide first. So I think it's a synergistic budding relationship. And I'm gonna
man, that's a conversation I have with clients all the time. Like, hey man, I need this video for, for my business. Like, okay, well, where are you going to put that video? Where are you going to distribute it? It's like, oh, so you don't have a website yet. Okay, so let's have that conversation. So it's like, I help clients build that brand, figure out what it is that they need, where they're missing things, so that when I do create the video for you, it gets the right amount of exposure it should be getting, right? If you don't have the social media platforms and things like that built out already, well, those are things that I can help you build and create, and then we do the video. So yeah, man, I'd love to have the conversation with you, see if there's anything I can do for, help you with your, extending an arm on for your business, and anybody else that that's listening to this.
Fantastic. You can find Samuel Rivera's work on YouTube, and also SamuelRiveraFilms.com. That's where you can learn about all his variety of work. Sam, thank you so much. I will invite you back for sure in the podcast, and be productive for the rest of the week. Thank you, man. Peace.
Richard, thanks for having me. See ya.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews, or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.